So I'm Gail Perry, Editor-in-Chief of CPA Practice Advisor magazine, and I'm joined today by our panelists, Elizabeth Adams, Manager of Links Advisory Consulting here in Dallas, Sanjeev Kriplani, Senior Vice President of Marketing and Growth at Bill.com, and Deborah Seefeld, an audit and accounting partner with Seefeld, Lawson Moeller in Woodlands, Texas. And co-anchoring this event with me is Alexandra DeFelice, Senior Manager of Moore Stephens North America. So this session is called Bottom Line Benefits of Taking Bookkeeping Out of the Back Office and into the Cloud. So Sanjeev, would you just tell us what that means?
Sure. The way Bill.com works is it takes what for a lot of people is a paper-based process and moves it into the cloud. So today, you know, the vast majority of businesses will get a bill in, open the envelope, look at it, maybe pass it to somebody to approve, then get it ready for payment. A check run goes through, they match the check up with the bill, put it in the file. Bill.com makes all that electronic and in the cloud. So the bill comes in, it's in the cloud, it's coded, and then when it's approved and ready for payment, button click and it's paid either via check or ACH.
Okay, now this process that you described of getting the paper bill in and letter opener and stamping and approving and passing it around the office, that's pretty commonplace. I mean, that's, at least we all grew up with that.
Absolutely.
So, what processes, what parts of that process would change if someone used a software solution to automate this method of dealing with bills? Well,
what most people do, you know, it's surprising today. Most people actually nowadays will email their bills. Like, there are a lot of bills that are being emailed. So what they do when they're working with Bill.com is they'll say, okay, just email it to my new Bill.com email address. So first thing that happens is it goes into an email inbox, so that opening of envelope or printing out an email doesn't happen. Then it gets coded, which happens today whether you're using a cloud-based solution or not. Somebody has to code it. Mm-hmm. And then it gets emailed to somebody for approval. So instead of being passed to somebody, it gets emailed. And then the approval is a button click instead of a signature or a initials. And then when it's time to pay, instead of running checks through accounting software, you just click a button and that secure check is mailed or ACH. Mm-hmm. So it's really what you asked what parts change. All that's really happening is the same stuff that should be happening is happening. It's just happening in a more efficient manner.
Okay. Now you're joined here by Deborah and Elizabeth, who I assume are people who are using a bill payment process, Bill.com, and I wonder if you guys can share with us some of your experiences of what life was like in the dark ages before you automated.
Well, Gail, one of the things you said, how is it different? You know, when we looked at a number of years ago, a lot of people did their own payroll in-house. Well, now when we have a client come in the door, a new client, the first thing we say is, how do you process your payroll? Because of fraud protection, it's one of the best things they can do. And they use, a lot of times, a third party to process their payroll. It's the same thing. Moving to a product like Bill.com, an online payment system, it's a way of automating. Clients that move to outsourcing their payroll don't ever say, let's do payroll again here. Mm-hmm.
And I have specifically one client that when I first started working with them, they had the paper process, right, with binders full of bills and vendor documents and printing checks all the time. And so as I've been working with them over the last little while, we've been able to move that to more of an electronic system. So it's more efficient for them, and then it makes it easy to either print a check or pay it electronically, and then it's all saved in the document management portion of the Bill.com software. And I've just had a really good experience moving from a paper system to an electronic platform.
What kind of responses do you get from people who, if you talk to them about moving to an electronic platform and and they're happy with what they're doing with paper?
The first thing that comes up is security, and I'm sure Sanjeev can speak to that specifically about what Bill.com offers. But that's a concern, and then just that education piece as far as how are we going to implement it, how is this process going to change. because if something's been working for someone for a long time, then getting someone to have a different process is a challenge, no matter what you're doing, I guess. But so overcoming some of those expectations and just showing people one piece of the process at a time, how it can save them time and money.
Well, in our firm, we deal with a lot of small to medium-sized businesses, and we specialize in nonprofits. And a lot of times what you see is they have a trusted bookkeeper, but basically no internal controls, no segregation of duties. So for them, it's, you know, when they look at that, they can change their process, and in changing the process, save time, which saves them money, which they always like if they own their own business, or if they're running a nonprofit. And along with that, by doing that, increase the controls.
I was a long time ago one of the first product managers of QuickBooks, and I remember being asked the same question. Well, why, aren't people resistant to this accounting software thing? I mean, isn't it just easier to do it on paper? Well, nowadays you don't hear that too much, right? And I think the same thing will happen. And you mentioned payroll. Nowadays, most people don't want to do their payroll in-house. I think the same thing is going to happen with AP and AR processes. It's just going to, it'll take a little time, but I think the one thing we've heard from our accounting partners is that when a client switches to this way, they absolutely, they're grateful and they cannot imagine going back. I don't know if you've sort of,
Yes. And when we first took a look at it, we had been paperless on our audit, accounting, and tax practice for years. But as far as our firm administration, we had not taken that step to go paperless. We were having the manual AP checks like a lot of our business clients were. So what we did first was we implemented it in-house. We said, we need to understand if this really works. If it doesn't work well for us, we're not going to even consider recommending it to clients. So we tried it it was 90 days that we were on the system before we even made the first recommendation. But there's no way we could go back. If someone calls me with a question, they didn't receive a payment, by the time they ask the question, as a partner in the firm, I can look and say, oh, not only did y'all receive the payment, it was on this day, let me send you a confirmation so you can look into it. So even for firm administration, it works, not just for our clients.
And people feel a real sense of power to that. When you can imagine every day businesses are getting called from people who say, hey, I don't think you paid me. And the ability to say on that phone call, 3 seconds later, actually, yes, I did. Here's the check number. Would you it'll be in your email inbox in about 5 seconds. They just feel very empowered.
What kinds of clients are the best candidates for automating their billing process?
Deborah, would you like to answer that?
Really, any of the clients, all of our clients, again, we deal with small to medium-sized businesses, small businesses, and nonprofits. They all process accounts payable. They all have the need for online document storage. Elizabeth talked about the binders, going in, and our clients expect us to be able to help them, but sometimes the answers to their questions are in a binder on the shelf at their office. So going to a cloud base where we can get to those documents and we can better serve them. So really anyone who processes AP, which is really everyone.
Yeah, and I would go back to, again, I hate to keep bringing up history, but I was asked the same question about accounting software. Who's really a best candidate for accounting software? And I would say, well, I think pretty much everybody should be on accounting software, but at the time it was, no, there's certain people who have to do it in paper, and there are others who are sort of the innovators who will be doing it with accounting software.
I do think that there are a handful of clients who are not great candidates for accounting software. Either like they have too few transactions or it's just, whatever.
And fair enough.
Yeah, so are there clients that might not be good candidates for online billing software?
Yeah, I mean, I personally think, like if you're doing relatively few transactions, if you're paying 5 bills a month, 7 bills a month, it may not be perceived to be worth it to switch just for the time savings alone. But I don't know, Gail, you have some thoughts about fraud, which I don't know if you want to share. I think they're quite interesting.
Well, along that lines, when we look at a client that comes to us and says, I need you to make these cash disbursements on our behalf, that we'll authorize each month, we're looking at it from a control standpoint. We want segregation of duties, not only at our clients, but within our firm when we process transactions for our clients. So, for example, if we had a client that came and they said, we want you to process 4 checks a month, is all we need, we would definitely put them on Bill.com. We would probably price that into our fee structure. Just like we use Bill.com software, we also use other softwares as well. So it's just part of the expenses we have of carrying out that engagement. But by doing that, then we're able to have that process in place that works well for all of our clients. And I'm sure we'll talk about the cost later, but we're talking about minimal cost.
Let's talk a little bit about if a decision has been made by one of your clients with your help to use an online billing process, to switch to Bill.com. What's that transition process like?
When I have implemented Bill.com with clients, I try to do it in bite-sized chunks because there are so many features to the software that I find that it's hard to do all of it at one time. So we'll start with a document management piece to it. So just keeping up with important documents that they need to have access to and just store it. And then moving on to creating the inbox and teaching them how to send things to the inbox, and then either having my staff or their staff go in and code some of those things to specific modules so that it's getting into the AP ledger, and then eventually moving into accepting e-payments, and then eventually the AR module that's available. So I found that it works best if you can just do it one piece at a time instead of bombarding with everything all at once. Mm-hmm. That's been my experience.
Well, there's actually tools as well built into that. So as Elizabeth's saying, when you're starting implementation, as you work through it, there are tools that's actually built into the software. So for example, someone who's using QuickBooks and they say, okay, we see the benefits here, we'd like to switch over, what does it take? We have an onboarding session. We generally have a representative from Bill.com on the conference call in less than 30 minutes. And that's really answering all the questions our client may have. We've got them up and loaded and ready to run. And QuickBooks talks to Bill.com. So all of the vendor information, all the account numbers, all that information transfers over. There's a synchronization that goes on. So it's not like they have to go in and set up a new software when maybe QuickBooks or another software program is working fine for their accounts payable.
Talk about the document management piece, because this is something a lot of firms struggle with in terms of not just with bills, with anything that they have of their clients that they're calling them and asking them for the same thing over and over. Does this work like a portal where they can go and retrieve documents from the past, not just their bills, but other things tied into your firm?
It does, yes. It allows you to set up folders, and you can create them however it best meets the need of the business, and everything gets into the software through the inbox. And so as long as something's sitting there, and you could just post it to a folder instead of posting it to a vendor or a payable or receivable, then yes, it acts as a file cabinet, an electronic file cabinet.
So in terms of changing behavior, how do you get people to change their behavior in terms of wanting to print things out and sign on them? And I want to get into the document management aspect a little bit at some point in this discussion, because I know that there's a lot of issues with that as well. I mean, both within your firm and within the client. How do you get them to change that behavior?
I would say that one of the most important things for change is just making stuff really easy. And I think, Gail talked about the setup thing. If you've got accounting software running and you can have a new system populated with all that information in about half an hour, and then the usage of the new system is, click here, click approve here, or forward, you get a bill, forward it to this email address. If it's simple enough, I think it's much easier to have that change happen than if it's not. Right? And that's why, Gail, you basically say, if for all new clients, hey, just use this. You know, it's not that hard, and you might not take a client on who isn't willing to use accounting software, and I think now you're saying the same thing about Bill.com. So I think it has to be above that ease hurdle in order to make it possible to do that.
So, for example, how would you let your vendors know you're even using this? Well, there's a blast, an email blast that goes out from the information that's already in QuickBooks that talk to Bill.com, and it lets your vendors know that this is how you want to pay them. And it gets the money in their bank quicker.
I get that. I get these emails from people a lot, not from bill payment, but let's use the example of, I'm on Google Hangouts. Did you know that I'm on whatever? And I kind of just delete it because I'm like, how many things do I need to learn? So let's say the vendor just ignores this. How do you, or they say, well, I don't want to use Bill.com. I want to continue paying you the way that, are they forced to pay them this way, or is it each vendor's choice?
They can decide that they don't want to do it, and they'll get a paper check just like they normally would before. So it's really up to them.
So the payer in Bill.com just clicks to pay. The vendor will get paid how the vendor wants to get paid. If they'd prefer to get paid electronically, fine. If they prefer to get paid with paper check, fine.
And if they get a paper check, they actually get a copy of the invoice attached to the check.
Because the document management part imaged the invoice, and so the full remittance is there.
So are all the documents then stored in the cloud, or are they stored on the individual or the company's server, or both places, or
The cloud.
It's all cloud.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you can do a year-end backup, and Elizabeth and I were visiting about that earlier, as a best practice. Companies could say how they want to back up.
CD of all the documents just as an extra precaution.
Yeah, I tell my clients it's saved in the cloud, backed up throughout the year, but then at the end of the year, I am going to request an archive copy of all that information that's saved on their servers, but just one additional layer of security.
Right.
So.
And I take it the historical information is accessible forever?
Yep.
And what happens when a company who's been using Bill.com, not that this would ever happen, but decides they're not going to use it anymore? And what happens to all of their data?
Well, they close their account. Even that data is stored because it may be needed in the future, but they can request the data on a CD and go on their merry way. So.
But it would be stored indefinitely? Cool.
Talk about within your own firms the decision process, because you're trying to educate the clients, and the way that you teach them, for example, is to say, well, do you do this with your payroll? So how internally did you make the decision that you were going to make this investment?
Okay. All right. Well, our firm is 10 individuals, and so we were really wanting to do it just because of the efficiencies of it. Be able to approve and pay our own bills, have the electronic storage, have it secured. And so it was just a business decision. It just made sense. We actually, I won't name the name of the payroll service provider, but we use a third-party payroll service provider to do our own firm payroll because it just makes sense, like it makes sense for our clients as well. And we implemented it over time, like Elizabeth was saying. We started in small steps, but by 90 days we were fully implemented on the needs, what our needs were for our firm.
Yeah, a lot of my clients, I have some that are well-established businesses, some are new businesses. So I work with a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, and they don't have a lot of space. So the idea of being able to have everything electronically, we're not taking up, if they do have an office, we're not taking up real estate with big boxes of paper. So I try to educate them that this is a good tool to manage that. And not only does it make it easier for the payables process, that they get that off their plate faster and vendors get paid faster, but they also don't have real estate taken up with paper.
Yeah. And what we found, I think the other part of your question was, how do you make that decision?
Yeah.
And what we found is that actually the majority of our customers are through recommendations. You hear about it from somebody who just says, wow, this works so well for me. That trusted recommendation then turns into a trial.
Okay. So if, the session is about taking your office into the cloud. So there's a lot that's involved with that, and we've been hearing this term now for however long. It depends on how long you've been in the profession, where you've heard it, or what it was called before that, you know, starting with online banking to whatever, you know, payroll, et cetera. If it's a company is just starting out, what would you advise to start in the cloud versus start in your own office? Anyone can take this question.
I'm always a fan of the cloud, and so I don't own a server. I have subscriptions to all those things, and so as far as creating a business model around that, I also heard snippets of the previous session, and we were talking about being competitive and just hiring staff and workflow and all those things, and really becoming a leader in remote workflow. And I really feel like when you have the right tools in place, like you have a cloud accounting module and you have a cloud payables module, and then maybe you need payroll, maybe you need timekeeping, and then you can get it all to talk together. You can really manage robust business efficiently and not have to invest in a lot of things like servers and things that are more traditional.
So did you never have servers, or like did you start out being a cloud firm, or did you migrate over?
No, I've never had a server. I don't know how to keep up with that. So,
How about?
Well, I was going to say in our firm we have a lot of clients that have servers and use QuickBooks, and but there's a certain aspect as far as working with the clients. Like now we don't transfer QuickBooks files; they need to host that in the cloud, and it's a much more efficient way to work. It's a much more effective way to work with our clients. But we have our clients that we have to look at the applications they're using, what makes sense for them.
Well, it's funny that you said they have to host it. So that's
if they're going to use us.
And that's a different mindset. And this is what we're hearing from these, new CPAs that are starting out or just really innovative. They're not letting the clients dictate to them, well, this is what I use. They're saying this, if you're going to work with us, this is the tools we use, and this is what you have to adhere to. So that's very, interesting.
Gail, you told a nice story about the auto mechanic, right? When you go in there, and the auto mechanic doesn't ask you, how would you like me to do the oil change, right? They just say, hey, look, I'm the expert. Yes. This is how you do it.
Yes. Well, and I think to price it competitively, we want to bring value to our clients, but we're also in the business to make money. So we've got to structure conducting the engagement in a very efficient manner to be able to have accounting services.
And talk about that a little bit, because billing's always a question. People are always struggling. What are you billing for what you're worth? You talked about putting the bill.com element within your fee. Is it, do you just give them a blank fee and say this is what it's going to be? Do you bill by the hour? How does that work?
Okay. Yeah, that's a real good question. We've got some clients that when they sign up with bill.com to use for bill paying, they just give their credit card. So it gets billed directly to their credit card. So that does not affect the fee at all. We have others that it just makes sense to price it in with the fee. So when we look at what it's going to cost to provide those services, it's easier than trying to explain the small amount it is. It's easier to just roll it into our fee estimate.
So there's no line item that says billed?
No. It's just like we wouldn't put a line item in there for QuickBooks or for our time and billing software and other overhead costs that we have that it's an expense of the firm to carry out that engagement.
Software programs like Bill.com and lots of other programs that automate various accounting processes seem to me are positioning our profession in such a way that they're putting bookkeepers out of business. Do you think that's true?
I'm not a tax person, but I remember years ago when TurboTax came out and they said the CPAs were going to be out of the tax business because of TurboTax. It's just a different tool that we use.
So how are bookkeepers keeping their jobs?
Whether they're, let's say, for example, using the Bill.com product, it's just as if a bookkeeper were processing manually or using the cloud. It's just a different, a process.
We have bookkeepers who have said, I don't want to take on a client unless they're willing to use Bill.com. Now, why is an interesting question. They say, look, previously, I had to drive to the client's office, spend 2-3 hours on site, do their stuff, and come home. Now it's super easy. I just log in from anywhere, anytime. I do their work for them. They approve. There's a segregation of duties. I mean, they love it. So I don't know if it's actually. I mean, I've had bookkeepers say, I can take on more clients, I can take on more business, I can be more effective. So I don't actually think it's putting them out of business any more than accounting software. Again, I heard the same thing. Accounting software putting bookkeepers out of business. No.
Well, I would say that from an accounting firm perspective, that probably makes sense. Like your point of you can take on more clients if you automate some of the processes, and I think that does make sense. What about with your clients, though? If the idea is to save time, cut paperwork, make things more efficient, and that client had, their favorite bookkeeper who'd been doing the payables and receivables for the last 20 years, and now what's that person going to do?
They do. It's fewer hours with that client. And then what we've found is that they get to take on 2 clients instead of 1. I mean, it's that simple.
Are you talking about from the business
Yeah,
standpoint within?
Yeah.
Okay. So if there is really only one bookkeeper, like you're describing, and you're the business owner, you should be concerned because there is no segregation of duties if you have just one bookkeeper. So even if it's a trusted employee that's been with you for years, you really need checks and balances set up. I'm a certified fraud examiner, and all too often, small business owners think about their products, their service, and what they're delivering, and they have a trusted bookkeeper, and they really don't have proper controls in place. And fraud happens. People don't like to talk about it, but once it does, they said, how could this happen to me? And by using something like Bill.com, there are controls set in these roles where the business owner can keep an eye even on the work that the trusted bookkeeper is taking care of.
Can we dig into that a little bit further? What kind of fraud can occur in a situation where the bill process is not automated?
Well, you could have checks that are. It doesn't even have to be internal. You could have checks that are mailed that are taken out of the mailbox. It can be the payee's name's changed, the check amount is changed. So check fraud. I mean, there's all different types of scams out there. Internally, it can be the trusted bookkeeper that has gotten themselves in a bind, and for one reason or another, they've gone down this path, and you would never think they would do that, but that they write a check and they pay their own bills and they put things on credit cards and then they pay the credit cards. So there's many different ways it can occur, but all too often it does occur internally.
We've actually been told stories of small business owners who, they are allowed to take vacations, and when they do, bills sometimes still have to be paid. And so more than one has told us that, yeah, there was that time when I took that vacation where I just told the bookkeeper, okay, go ahead and sign it, right? Well, that's fine that one time, but you've basically created now a pattern which could be repeated if that person needed money, right? Again, and much better to have a cloud-based solution. I mean, we've had customers say, I was in Italy and I approved all the bills and made sure they were paid.
And the same reason a lot of companies have gone to outsourcing their payroll because of fraud involved with paychecks. So, it's the same thing except bringing it over to the accounts payable side.
In terms of immediately, are there some questions that the firm owners can be asking of the bookkeepers? Is there a checklist? Or I mean, I know we're kind of going over the fraud area, but that's obviously important. So is there something that they should be looking out for regardless of whether they have an automated system or not?
Yes. One of the best things that business owners can do is be sure that the bank account's being looked at every day.
By them?
By somebody. And it can be by a controller, it can be by a bookkeeper, in some way that there's a verification process that goes on there. A lot of times small business owners think that if for some reason they did get on and they opened up their bank account, logged in online, and their account balance was wiped out, their funds had gone to another country, that no worry, it's FDIC insured and the bank's going to take care of it. And that is not so. On a commercial account, that is not so. It's different than individual accounts. So we say, look at your bank account every day, keep it reconciled, keep the account reconciled. For example, using Bill.com, instead of 20 transactions hitting your account or 200, however many transactions you have, there's one line item that hits each day, the Bill.com amount. and then the report comes out of bill.com, and there's already been approvals before those amounts were paid. So it's really easy to look at your bank account and know how much should have come out on that day. So we tell our small business clients, outsource your payroll is a very good recommendation. Second, go to an online bill payment process like with bill.com. Look at that bank account each day, and then look at your bank if they have what's called ACH debit blocking or positive pay. And if you have those steps in place, you are so much further protected and really have mitigated the risk of running your business.
So what are those last two things, the ACH debit blocking and the
positive pay?
What are they?
Okay, financial institutions offer ACH debit blocking, which says unless you approve an ACH to clear on your account, it will not clear. And positive pay, if you have not uploaded or notified them of checks that will be clearing, they're not going to clear it on your account. And so when you put that in place, if you have, again, the payroll outsourced, the AP, which is online, and then you've got that protection at the bank, it really reduces the chance that anything's going to get through on your bank account that wasn't properly approved.
And the positive pay is built into bill.com, because what happens is every check issued on bill.com is also matched with a file that goes directly to the bank.
Mm-hmm. And that matches actually payee names as well.
So how does a small business make sure they've got all this stuff in place, these protections?
Well, one would be looking at their accounting procedures and hopefully consulting with their CPA firm or someone to assist them if they don't have the expertise in-house to look at that. But the bank recs, that's pretty straightforward on what needs to be done there. Again, the bankers, if you call any bank and say, my CPA firm has mentioned ACH debit blocking, positive pay. I'm not really sure what these products are. What do they cost? How do I get that in place? The bankers would love to tell you in treasury management, because again, it's almost like an insurance policy, pretty low cost. But if you're paying $20, $30 a month and you've got a lot more peace of mind as a business owner, because you know things aren't going through your bank account without your awareness and without the controls in place, it's well worth it.
So we've got potential fraud protection or prevention, and we've got efficiency and time saving. What other advantages are there to deciding to go with an online billing solution?
Elizabeth, you were talking about being able to access and service the clients from afar.
Yes. So I have, sometimes I work in my client's office, sometimes I work remotely. I have a couple staff members that work with me as well, and so it works out great when if someone, a staff member of a client, forwards something to the bill.com inbox, and my staff will go in and code everything, and so I know the next time I go meet with the client that it's all taken care of. There's a complete list of all of the payables, and we can talk about it, talk about cash management and all those things. So that has been really helpful, being able to access everything remotely. And then I guess one other point that I was thinking of when you were speaking a minute ago, as far as making sure the business owners are actually looking at their cash balances. I do a lot of coaching with business owners, and if they're the ones that are taking care of the entering in the daily transactions themselves, like maybe they don't have a bookkeeper on staff, or maybe they don't have the ability to outsource all of that right now, then they're the one that's going to be taking care of everything. So making sure that they do have some sort of I use both Xero and QuickBooks Online, and in both of those platforms you can connect the cash account and the balance sheet to the bank feed, right? So then there's all these transactions that are sitting in the to-do list. So I try to get them to go in and code everything at least once a week at a minimum, so that they are making sure that the balance per the bank agrees to the balance per the books as well. Just as another way to safeguard themselves, making sure that everything running through their bank statements and bank accounts is what they actually expected to. So.
Yeah. You mentioned time savings and security, and the two other things we hear are control and organization. Right. So control is slightly different than security. It's just making sure that everything that is paid should be paid, that if, before I pay somebody, I've validated that it's something I want to pay, et cetera. So there's that control element to it. and then just being organized, right? Knowing where everything is, whenever you need to look it up, and being able to respond to questions easily. That's another thing that we've heard.
Well, let's get into the organization a little bit more. And you're talking about you have these folders and they're neat and you know where the things are. Well, obviously this is a big problem that CPA firms have of just having folders everywhere. And one person, I mean, if you're in a small firm, there's 3 people, whatever, but it's like one person organizes it one way, one person organizes it another way, and there's a problem, especially with document management systems, et cetera, when you're trying to transfer it over to an electronic means, because there's no rhyme or reason to how you're doing it manually. So how do you make sure that when they're transferring it over to an electronic process that it's organized in a way that makes sense? You have one person putting the folders in alphabetical order and one person putting them in a different order that makes sense for them. How are you making sure it's okay?
I create a list of instructions, and this is how we index our files, and these are the folders, and so it's, as long as you follow the instructions, everyone is on the same page.
So who came up with that process?
I created the instructions, at least for my business and my clients, and
so,
all that,
are there other people at your level, or are you, in other words, if there's a firm and there's 3 partners, 3 people might do it a different way. So how are you going to get agreement on that?
Well, you may answer that, Elizabeth. In our firm, for example, we have audit, accounting, and tax services. And it's really no different. You set out policies and procedures on how you name files, how they're structured within the tax engagement. So all 1040 paperless tax engagements look identical. You pull up a nonprofit audit engagement in our software that we use for that. The file structure is identical on all of them. So it's really no different. It's really saying, what are we going to use? What is going to be stored on Bill.com in the storage, and what makes sense? And if so, here's the file structure. So it's really just adopting almost like a template that you would use in carrying out any other kind of engagement.
And if you don't even want to go to that level, the default Bill.com organizational principle is everything is organized in a file by the name of either the customer or the vendor. And almost everything that you've got has some association there, and if it doesn't, then it falls into this third category, which you can categorize. It starts to get a little jumpy. But most things have a customer or a vendor, whether it's a contract, whether it's an estimate, right? And so those are then organized underneath. And the beauty of it is, because the find and search function is so easy, you almost just need to click on the vendor name, and there's a scan there by date, or if you need to type in a number, you can do that. It comes up instantly, and it's much faster than paper.
We didn't really intend to make this conference about generations, but we've covered generations kind of extensively in the last 2 sessions. Do you find situations where if you have a client that is considering or is transitioning to moving some of its accounting work into the cloud, do generations make a difference? Are younger people more in tune with that and more excited about it than older people in the office? What kind of experiences have you had with that?
Well, I think that our business owners and the nonprofits I work with, I don't really see that much of a difference in generational. The fact is, if someone is really on top of their game in their business, they're looking for how can we do this the best way and save the most money. And again, I'm always looking at what controls need to be in place because our clients aren't thinking about that. And once you start communicating that information to them, to me, it really hasn't made a difference what age they are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Talking about being able to connect with your clients, especially in a hosted environment, if you can actually use GoToMeeting or whatever tool where you can go in and actually see what they're doing wrong. Are either one of you, I'm noticing this as kind of, it's a value-added service. You're not just being their bookkeeper. A lot of times people complain with QuickBooks, with whatever. I get their books, they're a mess. I sit there, I spend all this time cleaning them up, fixing their problems. Are either one of you doing anything where you can actually go in real time and instead of just fixing their problems in real time, actually educating them about, look, I see that you're doing this, and that wrong, or another step up is, I see your own accounts receivable is this many days behind. Here's a way to start billing your own clients better. Are you doing any more value-added services like that?
Yes. We
I do
use
that,
GoToMeeting. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I do. I do have most of those conversations in person with my clients. Sometimes it is on the phone if it's an immediate question because I can't access, what they are trying to resolve at that moment. But I find that it's most beneficial to actually sit with the business owner and talk with them about, I saw that you did this. This is how you correct it. Here's a suggestion of what should be done next time this happens. And then I also do the same thing with their staff. If they have a admin that is helping them with some of the transactional level things, usually works best if you can have a group of transactions to give examples. So.
I agree with Elizabeth. FaceTime with our clients, because we're not only talking about the numbers on the reports, but we're also talking about their business and maybe changes that are going on. So I like the face-to-face meetings, but as far as going online, we use GoToMeeting to assist with QuickBooks consulting problems, questions they may have. Because in the Woodlands, we're in the greater Houston area. To get in the car and go somewhere, you're looking at 45 minutes, even if they're in our community, and back. So we've got an hour and a half travel time. Our clients don't want to pay for that. So we can jump on and assist them as needed using GoToMeeting.
And sometimes, since I use so many of the, like Xero and QuickBooks Online, it's all web-based anyway. And so I have a username, my client has a username, and so we don't even have to turn on GoToMeeting because we can actually be looking at the same thing in the web browser.
That's what we've heard too, is that GoToMeeting is great for desktop.
Yeah.
But once you're in the cloud, guess what? You don't actually need it, right?
Well, but I guess it's just to handhold and say, like circle thing. I mean, I don't know if you can do that within the software, but I find that helpful because I'm a visual person to say, okay, see when you did this here, circle it so they're looking at what you are looking at, and even just if there's ability to see their face, because again, it's something that's really important to them as well. So.
All right, we have one more CPE code that we want to put on the screen real quickly. So this is the third CPE code for this session. So you'll want to keep track of all 3 codes that you've seen if you plan on requesting CPE credit for this session. So we're about ready to conclude. Just a couple minutes left. Are there things that we can wrap up that will give us some insights as to, once again, what that decision-making process is for moving companies a portion of their accounting process, this in particular billing and accounts receivable and payables, into the cloud, and what the mindset is of the companies that are on the cusp of being ready to do that?
Well, for starters, in our firm, the first thing we look at is cost, because there can be a lot of benefits. There's great tools out there that we can use for our clients, but we're really always looking at that cost benefit. So as we started learning, for example, about Bill.com, we started looking at what's it going to cost us? And I don't know, I'll throw a few numbers out, correct me if I'm wrong on these, but we pay like $49 a month to have this console, this platform that we can offer our clients, which is such a low cost. And then along with that, if a client wants to be on board, the most it's going to cost them to have a subscription is $25. If they want to use her, it's like $3 a month extra. I mean, we're talking about very low dollars for a very powerful product to have. The ACH transactions cost about like the price of a stamp, and I think checks are $1.49. And if you really compare that, you see $1.49 to process a check. Well, when you look at really what it costs to process a check, that is a very good price. So, we started with looking at the cost. Does it make sense for us, and does it make sense for our clients? And which it did. And if I got any of those numbers wrong, please, please correct me, or at least I'm an auditor. So I will say close enough.
I think there's a virtual tote associated with this, which we do have all the pricing, and I think there's a special offer in there also for folks if they want to get started. I think your question about sort of getting those people on the cusp is a great one, and I do think that ROI analysis too. I think just recognizing that there are, that with any new thing, there are a bunch of people who are incredibly happy that they've done it, and there are a bunch of people who are hesitant because it's a new thing. And I don't know if there's a magic formula to get the hesitant people over, except to hear from people who are incredibly happy and recognize that there are a lot of them.
Okay.
That's my thought. I don't know, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I agree.
And you can try it. You can turn it on and turn it off. So a CPA firm that's contemplating offering this to their clients, they can turn it on. So for less than $100, they can try something out, see how it works, see how their clients could benefit from this, and say, you know what, it's not for me or it's not for our clients at this time, and turn it off. So minimal cost investment, which a lot of times when you're picking that software, you're saying this is either going to be a great thing or not so great thing, and we spent a lot of money on it. So very low cost to test drive it.
Yeah, and I think, for us, obviously endorsed by the AICPA, sold by Bank of America and PNC to their clients. 30 of the top 100 accounting firms in the nation recommend and use Bill.com. There's enough evidence that you can sort of say, okay, it's worth trying, and then the barrier to trial hopefully is low.
Okay. We want to thank all of you very much for coming and sharing your insights and having this session with us. And thank all of you who are attending. We very much appreciate Bill.com for sponsoring this session. And before you go, there is a very entertaining and enlightening video that we're going to show you that kind of wraps up some of the things we've talked about regarding Bill.com. And then our next session will start at the top of the hour. So thank you very much.
We asked some Bill.com customers to imagine their lives without Bill.com. Let's see what they had to say.
It would be a nightmare if Bill.com were to go away.
Yeah, I'd feel
sad.
I think I would cry.
That would be horrible. Boy, we would have to go back to a manual process.
Well, without Bill.com, I'd have to open a piece of mail, take the paper out, stamp it that it had been received today, write the date on it, write the GL account on it.
Route that bill in an inter-office envelope and have manager 1 sign it, and if it's over a certain amount, have manager 2 sign it, route it back manually to the accounting department to have them take it out of the envelope, and then input it with their fingers into the computer system.
It would be a stack of 250 or 300 checks that he would manually have to sign every month.
The whole process was time-consuming and a waste of paper.
Now I get an email from Bill.com that tells me I've got a new electronic invoice in my inbox. I open that up, I'm able to review all the details, process it in a couple of minutes. It automatically triggers an email to the supervisor that needs to approve it.
Because what you have is the same piece of paper, but it's in digital form. You have the same capture of information. It's all on the screen of who approved it before. And it's the way that people want to work. Oh, I can go to my web browser and approve a bill? I'm now the CFO rock star versus the CFO bottleneck.
My CFO the night before has queued up the bills and I just hit approve, approve, approve. It takes me 5 minutes. I'm done in the morning.
And I said, well, it replaces check signing. He said, wait, I don't have to sign checks anymore? And he's loved it ever since.
My absolute favorite thing is being able to type in a vendor name, see all the history, and pull up the checks when they say they didn't receive them.
Within seconds, I can just type in the vendor name and see a list of all the invoices they've ever sent us and see the payment status, and I can even tell them what day they should have received the check.
Bill.com gets rid of all the bill pay hassles you hate. Could be the reason why it's the fastest growing business payments network, with over 500,000 members and growing and billions in payments each year.
We process hundreds of payments a month, and we do it in a third of the time.
We don't have to hire between 1.5 and 2 full-time people that would otherwise be manually processing paper bills because of Bill.com.
No wonder over 60% of new Bill.com customers were referred by people they know.
Oh, the learning curve for Bill.com is almost non-existent.
We were scared to try it and then just really pleasantly surprised. It was one of the few software implementations that was easier than it was described, not harder.
And so I looked into it, and it seemed like there was almost no risk in trying it. It's one of the amazing features of Bill.com. You can be up and running within minutes, and there's really no risk if you don't like it. I mean, we could shut it off too within minutes. So we tried it, and it was fantastic, so we kept using it.
So try it. You might like it too.